This is all handmation.
Really?
Wait, you're kidding?
Relax, everybody, I'm here.
So I had the opportunity to work on the Lego movie. I know they actually started looking at Lego pieces under microscopes. So this was the hardest shot I've ever done in my career.
You just dropped a bomb right there. What?
Thanks to Noom for sponsoring this video. Stick around to figure out how you can get your free Noom evaluation.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Visual Effects Artists React. We are joined today on the couch by Mathieu Dimuro, who is a longtime industry vet. He's worked on a ton of films you've heard of. He's currently an animation supervisor over at Agora Studios. Matt, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I am Matt. I am as you said, I'm a supervisor for Agora Studio. My career spans now more than 20 years. I've worked at Framestore, Animal Logic in Australia, and ILM, and now Agora.
What is Agora Studios?
So Agora Studio is not your typical studio where there's an infrastructure and all that. We're actually a virtual studio, and we have hundreds of artists all over the world. We primarily do animation and rigging, and this way we can kind of cater to almost any production from all over the world, which is great because we'll have supervisors that are located everywhere.
Also, friggin', we got the Jibaro himself here.
Well, it's actually one of 3 Jibaros. We were 3 supervisors working on Jibaro. Jibaro is just a wonderful show. Alberto Mielgo, it's his own story. He directed, art directed. He is behind every little corner of that project.
So now this is the second time we're looking at this episode?
Yeah, but now we have somebody that actually worked on it.
We were lucky enough to supervise the animation and do all of the rigging for the show. So we took care of that portion of it, and it was just a phenomenal experience.
Was this show motion capture or is this all hand animation?
This is all handmation. That is
Really?
Wait, you're kidding?
All of it. Yep.
Really?
Yep.
No mocap at all?
None.
Even for
Zero.
her?
None.
How did you do that?
How did we do that?
Well, yeah,
that is a very important question.
Did you at least have like reference? Surely for her at least you have an actual dancer performing the routine, the choreography.
You're correct.
I mean, sick.
So Alberto is very meticulous. Also, it's all in his head. And it's rare that you get the opportunity to work with somebody that has the whole thing in their heads. They filmed these amazing performers. They had multiple cameras, front, side, and essentially we got that footage and we used that for all the performances. And with Alberto, he will film until he gets the performance that he wants. So these performers worked really, really hard, and he finally got exactly what he wanted. And the mandate was anything weird you keep, don't go beyond that, don't go less than that. And some people will argue, well, you're just rotoscoping at this point, and that's the big debate, where why didn't you mocap this?
Yeah.
And actually, we had 1 or 2 artists go, well, why don't we just mocap this? But I think there's a jitteriness to human beings that gets translated into mocap that somehow gets a bit removed when you're animating. I do think it adds a certain level of hyperrealism, not hyperrealism, but it's like art, right? Like there's something about it, but it's not quite perfect.
Well, I think it echoes what the whole vibe and aesthetic of this entire, episode is. It's very painterly. It's surreal almost.
Exactly.
In that it feels hyper-real, but also very much so not at the same time, and it's a very interesting combination. So I'm fascinated that you have this similar approach in the actual animation itself.
And you can see it in some projects, and even old school Disney animation 2D stuff where they would like project on a wall and draw. All of a sudden the feeling changes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a bigger gap there in terms of with what we do, but sometimes you'll watch a project and you go, mocap, not mocap, mocap, not mocap.
We've done some motion capture work in the studio as well. And really at the end of the day, you end up with just a simple skeleton. And real human beings are very dexterous. And
Yeah.
I have a watch here, right? I have a watch on. Well, if we did mocap and a character wanted to grab my wrist, it's just gonna move over my wrist. But if you're doing animation and somebody grabbed my wrist, you can have the fingers land around the watch when you're dealing with the actual 3D model and doing it by hand.
So this was the hardest shot I've ever done in my career.
You just dropped a bomb right there. What? The hardest shot of your entire career?
Yep. What Alberto likes to do is the camera's at the very, very end. So everything has to work in all these views. So this is why we have a profile, and this is how we approved everything. So everything had to match on every angle. But as you can see, the male performer does not have a giant armor. All the contacts and all that had to work in every angle just because the cameras might change.
I guess that lends itself to doing hand animation, is that you're dealing with the actual character rig, with the armor and the proportions. And now when you're moving everything, you can move it so it's perfect. And you're not clipping through itself, you're not intersecting.
Correct, because that might get revealed later.
That means that's more work, because typically a shot like this starts and you already have the camera angles already set, so you know what you can get away with. Like, you're not gonna animate the dude's toes and feet if it's a close-up on his face.
Correct.
Obviously.
Correct.
But if you don't know whether or not the shot's gonna be like, oh, look at these toes real quick, gotta make sure those toes are ready to go.
There was a point where we talked about production and we're like, okay, can we ballpark saying no toes on this one, but we'll give you the knees? And Alberto was like, yeah, that's cool. He's very, very savvy and understands every department, which is very rad for somebody so creative.
I feel like that's very important.
Yes.
The first time I saw anything from Jibaro was just an animated like GIF. And then my first reaction was like, whoa, is this real? You know? And it's funny because like when you stop and you look at the actual character models, like they don't look real. They very much look like CG character models. Like it's incredibly high quality CG. It's beautiful rendering, don't get me wrong, but like it's CG. But yet there's so much of it that looks real, and like so much of that comes through the camera work and the imperfection and the dirtiness and the shakes and the dust and the light and the physics. It's something you don't ever really see in CG. But you see it all the time in real life, so it just triggers all those things in your brain to be like, oh, that's real.
The cameras add energy and life and helps tell the story that he wants. And I think as animators, someone's like, oh, I really want to lower the hand. So there would be like a nicer composition. But in the end, what often he would say is that if you were to film an actor, he wouldn't necessarily know where the camera is and his hand wouldn't be in frame. That feels forced. And he wants it to feel real. And so by having things that are too perfect in cameras, you lose a bit of that.
So we're always talking about other people's effects, and we're always talking about other people's movies. And you're probably like, what about you guys? Where are your effects? Well, we have been trying to stay on the cutting edge of technology. You know that crazy LED screen from The Mandalorian? Well, we've tried to do the same thing here for our show, Son of a Dungeon. So by utilizing virtual reality trackers from the Vive, Unreal Engine 5 and its real-time rendering, and photo scanning to get our environments from our game board rather than having to model the whole thing, we've been able to crank out some crazy shots. And on top of that, this year we have Fenner and Jordan that have been working with us and helping us out. And we've actually been using Nuke, you know, that crazy VFX program that they always talk about in big budget films. We're actually using it. I mean, check out these before and afters. I think we have like 10 times as many VFX shots compared to the first season. And as cool as these shots are, it doesn't matter if the story is no good. But we actually have like a full-length first episode for free. It just dropped on the channel, actually. It just dropped like an hour ago. You should go check it out. Tell us what you think. It's been a year in the making, and nothing would mean more to us than if you went and watched it. Episode 1, it's on YouTube right now. Go check it out. You know, when we talk about like mimicking elements in real life to have this weird, surreal version of looking at CG that feels real, there's another project that comes to mind.
Oh my gosh, I love this song!
Everything is awesome.
In the Lego movie, it's like they're real Legos. It's animation land still, but they're real Legos. They have the seams from the molds, they have the bumps, they have the scratches. You know, Spaceman has his helmet broken, like every single guy had their helmet broken.
Yeah. So I had the opportunity to work on the Lego movie.
What did you guys do to get that feeling of real?
I know they actually started looking at Lego pieces under microscopes to see like, what is it? Because I think the first passes they had, they're like, there's something missing. And then they realized that some of the bricks, or most of the bricks, had a small amount of warping to it and a small amount of scratches and those kinds of details that they were then able to do a procedural pass before lighting to warp the bricks a little bit so that the light can catch those imperfections and actually look nicer.
So you guys built like a full-on Lego simulation inside your system?
Pretty much. Well, I didn't, but some very smart people did.
When you look at it, it's just a simple, smooth plastic surface, but in reality, just like the mirrors at a House of Mirrors, where it kind of like reflects light very differently and it makes that reflection look very different, for something like this, that is still enough to subtly influence our brains into believing that this is real plastic. Because we see it all the time without actually acknowledging that it's not perfectly flat.
I suppose you also see it really represented when you have like walls built out of bricks, and it's not like perfectly like flush scenes coming together, becoming invisible. It's like you actually see a little bit of the gap, and like now you can see the individual bricks like you could in real life because they're not, like you see it there, like they're not perfectly squished all down the same amount.
One of the interesting things about the mandate for the show was that imagine if somebody was making this in their basement. The typical reaction for an animator is you want to overlap stuff and.
Wait, what do you mean by overlap?
Overlap? This?
Oh, it's like the motion goes extra.
So if an object goes down, typically something will overlap and come down, right?
Like the springiness of
Kinda.
Jello.
If I'm doing this with my chest and my head's bobbling, this is overlap, essentially. So a lot of animators, we want to add that, we want to add details. We were like, oh, this is a feature for Lego. This is going to be amazing. So the first thing we wanted to do is overlap heads. And then as a Lego piece, we all played with them as kids and as grown-ups, let's be honest. And then you would kind of separate them and, kind of swivel off those two little pegs. And then you go, oh, it looks kind of sweet and gets a little bit overlap and this and that. And then we'd show it and they're like, no, it feels like we're seeing their innards.
Oh.
We don't want to see that. Like, oh, okay. And then the funny thing is, as soon as you kind of put them back together and kept the same overall motion, they felt more appealing.
You took away this and you made it.
Made it very, and then the motions and then the hand gestures, like those little cuppy hands. And it just became like funnier. One of the things I used to say, if you're not giggling at your desk, then something's going wrong.
Is it harder or easier to animate this kind of stop motion vibe?
It depends. I think certain artists have preferences, and some people maybe prefer the VFX style, the heavier creatures. I love animating twos.
You mentioned animating on twos, which is a old classic example to get fewer frames for more time, right? Instead of animating for every single frame, you're animating every other frame. And so you end up with a sequence that's roughly like 12 frames per second type deal. So when you're doing the animation for twos, are you specifically stop motion animating every 2 frames, or do you have like an animation that goes out the whole time, but only every other frame is getting rendered?
So we had to control every frame that was going to be rendered. Typically, we would block or do the first pass of animation, which is a rougher pass and less detailed, to just show, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to jump here, and I want to land here, and kind of, you rough out your idea. And you would do that spline, meaning it wouldn't be on twos. It would be smooth animation. And then from there you go, yep, all the ideas are good, put that on twos. Now I keep saying twos, but for this show they said, if it's gonna be 3s, if it's 4s, if it's 1s, you guys can do whatever you want so long as it makes it better.
Yeah, so I definitely did notice Superman there was on 1s. He was floating very smoothly as everyone else was like, beep, 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 beep.
Yeah, so flight on 2s doesn't look good. Again,
Interesting,
it feels kind of jaggedy, but like maybe for an arm motion or something, or if it's a really fast motion, you go, it happens over 3 frames. I actually need a pose for the arm for those 3 frames, because if not, it just pops.
Yeah, it gets lost.
Exactly.
I mean, Lego Movie is one of the most beautiful CG movies, in my opinion.
It still holds up really well.
Oh yeah, they nailed it. It's going to hold up forever. It's not like in 10 years, like, it doesn't look like Legos. It's like, no, it still looks like photoreal Legos, no matter when you look at it.
Yeah, I got to supervise on this. It was a small team. It's been one of my favorite VFX shows that I've done. We got to go in the pre-prod.
Pre-prod, you mean pre-production?
Correct, pre-production, which means that you allocate time to develop a look, a style, and a feel before you actually start doing shot work. And I got to communicate directly with the director. And it was super fun, because also I think sometimes you just find people that you're on the same wavelength.
Okay,
which is what happened with the director and myself. So I had a great time working with him.
Is that LCG?
LCG.
Wow. That slime layer, man.
Yeah, it looks great.
How do you approach a character like this that isn't like a real creature, where you can't have reference per se?
Body mechanics are very important for me. There's things you can do. You can film yourself kind of crawling on your knuckles, and get some of the interesting motion. You can find sometimes footage of like athletes doing certain things. But I think for this, I think we shot some reference, but obviously our weight and our legs and all that don't correlate properly to a character like this.
So like, what is your reference for something like this? Do you look to nature? Do you look to animals?
You can, but it's like hard to find an animal that would have arms and drag their bodies. I think some of it is also, this is also where you get some freedom. A trained eye would saying, okay, well, it has to be a bit slower, a bit heavier. There's bones in here, so the hips have to work a certain way with the torso, and you could potentially compare that to a human and say, okay, or an animal that has the kind of dog legs, and see how the hips work. And there's stuff like that you can pull, and you can pick and choose for the shot. But I think some of that is actually when we do get to be more creative, and we do get to put some of the, like as the arm comes down, the elbow has to absorb the weight and stuff like that, which I think communicates to the character feeling like they're tangible.
So what made this project so rewarding?
I think it's the collaboration aspect. And on a lot of very, very big projects, you get X amount of collaboration. Also, there shouldn't be on some of those big projects. You can't have 100 voices. Like, for example, there's a guy getting his head ripped out. And they're like, the director said, I just want this to be really violent. I'm like, well, could he have a hard time pulling it for a bit and then finally it rips? And then you can have like, yeah, there you go. So being able to pitch that directly to the director allows some freedom. And it's cool when they say yes to your ideas. It feels great.
How do you find this like boundary between the director and yourself as an artist, where you want to bring your creativity and you want to bring your ideas, and they also have their creativity and their ideas?
As a supervisor and even as a lead, I think it's important to have your artist's voice, be heard. And sometimes you'll get, and I love like juniors or people that just started the industry. I love juniors because they're so excited. And anytime we need a new idea, those are the people I go see. Like, hey man, we need something to happen with this. And he's like, oh, what if? And then it's always too crazy. So you just drop it down like 30%. You're like, all right, cool, I'm gonna pitch that, okay, cool. But I think it's important and everyone then feels like they're a part of it. And I think that's also part of the roles that we have as leads or soups to try to engage people.
What's up guys, Christian here, taking a break from the VJ station that is behind the camera of this React episode to come tell you about my favorite sponsor of this show, Noom. Noom has an emphasis on science to help you meet and exceed your non-scale goals, where they kind of teach you how the body works and how your mind works and try to kind of tailor a program that works for overall long-term weight loss journey. One of my favorite tools that they have is the food tracker, and they've actually updated it since the last time we talked. We used to talk about green, yellow, and red foods, but they've learned from people like me that red kind of makes it feel like you're not allowed to touch those foods ever again, like red is no-go. And that is not what Noom is trying to teach you. They've changed the red to orange just to make it more of a warning. Orange are foods that you want to eat a little bit less of and a little bit in moderation, but that does not mean swear those foods off forever. I went to Hawaii just about a month ago for like 2 weeks. And you're on vacation. You're not going to abide by your diet all the time, You're gonna be out there trying the new cuisine in the new place you're at. So sometimes the weight fluctuates, and that's okay. Again, Noom teaches you that it's not all about the constant loss. You're gonna have fluctuations in weight and also in what you eat, and sometimes you're gonna break your calorie budget. And that's what Noom tries to do, is empower you through knowledge so you can make good decisions for yourself moving forward. They have great articles based on science and focus groups to really help drive those points. Ever since they came and approached us, I've been an avid user and I have not stopped since. And so it's really helped. I've really just felt better and I've lost a lot of weight. Even when I do fluctuate, I feel good about being able to get back on track with their support, so I can't recommend it enough. If you would like to get your free Noom evaluation, just click the link in the description below and to get started. I saw all the comments and people that have reached out over the months with both words of encouragement, but also just comments saying that they've given it a shot and they've started Noom and they're having a great time and great success, and that's like the most motivation you guys can give me ever. Thanks to Noom for sponsoring this video and approaching us again. Hit me up, let me know about your results or that you got started, and let's get back to this React episode.
So with a virtual studio where everyone's spread out anywhere, it feels like you could probably create a pretty big community.
So for the Agora community, we're trying to create a space where we can have high quality teaching and lessons for artists that's for free. And this is coming from veterans like me and other veterans and other people that are from the community that are working at large and sharing those insights and tips and tricks. We also offer mentoring at an affordable rate. This doesn't just mean for up-and-comers, students, and this and that. For any level, any skill level is actually quite great. Somebody wanting to go from VFX to feature film and they're like, I don't know, they can work on their own piece, get some mentoring by somebody who's been doing it for a long time. And that's actually quite cool.
Okay, we'll have a link down in the description below if that sounds interesting to you. It's really cool that you guys are doing that, and honestly really smart, because right now with how much media is just exploding, everybody's like, we need more people that know how to do this, but
Yeah.
There's not enough people that know how to do this.
Yeah, it is finding ways for the ones that do want to give back to the community, artists that are working, or find little pockets of time for them to collaborate or to contribute. And for the mentoring stuff, it's something that some of us do on a day-to-day with the artists that we work with, and so it's just a natural thing to do with people that are trying to get better.
Cool, Matt, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, this was awesome.
Yeah.
Till next time.
Yeah.